After the recent eruption of Mount Kanlaon on Tuesday morning, several areas, including La Carlota, were affected by ashfall, leading to suspension of classes and the evacuation of nearby communities. To discuss the ongoing relief efforts and environmental impacts of the eruption, we have on the phone OCD Deputy Chief of Staff and Spokesperson, Mr. Chris Bendijo. Magandang umaga po. Thank you very much for joining us.
Hi, Paolo. Good morning.
Sir Chris, can you give us an update first on the situation in and around Kanlaon, especially after its eruption? Of course, yung immediate response po ng gobyerno.
Yes, after the eruption yesterday, first, PHIVOLCS is considering this as a minor eruption. No? That's why there's no elevation of the alert level to 4. It's still maintained at alert level 3. But considering the eruption, which had a height of about 4,000 meters, no, there is significant ashfall in the surrounding areas and barangays. That's why the initial demand from the local government units would be for face masks and water. And for the OCD, we have prepositioned around 12,000 face masks in the area that is ready to complement those that will be deployed by the LGUs. And of course, the LGUs, as well as the Philippine Red Cross, also deployed water rationing trucks to cater to the needs of our kababayans.
You mentioned po that the face masks are one of the first actions taken by the OCD, or at least to help address yung ashfall po. But in terms of the other resources that are being deployed there, especially when it comes to the food and water provisions for those in any evacuation centers, could you give us more clarity on the type of resources available po?
Yes. Regarding food items, our DSWD has ready items, no? Yung kanilang mga warehousing, they have already put up the system that they are ready to deploy at any given time around 200,000 food packs, no? So with respect to the deployment of food packs, this is handled by DSWD, and I'll verify, but I'm pretty sure that they have already deployed this already.
Sir, are there any areas in particular that have been affected na medyo nahihirapan puntahan ng relief efforts?
We have to consider that it was advantageous for us to maintain our citizens in the evacuation centers. So very minimal need for forced evacuation. We just encountered a few individuals because if you remember, we allowed certain individuals to go back within the 6-kilometer danger zone for purposes of planting, harvesting. So it was just a very limited number for purposes of evacuation. But considering the ashfall, we are anticipating perhaps a significant increase as to number of families and individuals who might seek shelter in our evacuation centers. At present, we're monitoring 5 affected LGUs. That's a total of 22 evacuation centers.
A challenge, sir, in La Carlota City, according to the DRRMO, is that they have had to conduct water filtration due to contamination po sa water supply po nila. Is this something the OCD is helping support? And of course, how much of an issue is yung clean and safe drinking water po in the affected areas?
That's correct. No? A necessary consequence of ashfall would be contamination of our water resources. Hence, there is really a significant need for water filtration. For purposes of water filtration, from just to give you some numbers, no, from February 6 to April 7, no, a total of 160,000 liters for potable water has been processed or filtered and processed. For purposes of cleaning, hygiene, and washing, that would be a total of 25,700 liters of water. That's a total of almost 200,000 liters of water. This will be significantly affected by the sources of water that we can get. But our resources are there. The water filtration systems of OCD, as well as the other LGUs, no, are there in the areas to cater to the needs of our kababayans.
Is there any extra medical support po, considering the fact that the ashfall does affect, could actually exacerbate mga respiratory problems, especially for those in the affected areas? You mentioned giving out yung mga face masks po, but for those who have been adversely affected by the ashfall, is there any extra medical services being provided to those, especially sa mga evacuation centers po natin?
That's correct. No? If you recall, perhaps weeks before, the president had already instructed the creation of the Task Force Kanlaon. And part of its function is to ensure the inventory of medicines in the area, considering that we have protracted effects of Kanlaon. And this will be, again, affected by the recent eruption. But in terms of inventory of medical supplies, it has been checked just last week, and we have sufficient medical supplies to address this issue.
You mentioned po that this task force actually has been present before this eruption. In fact, this situation has been monitored for quite a significant period po. Just how effective do you feel was the preemptive preparations po for this particular eruption, considering yun nga, there haven't had to be forced evacuations or very limited po, and of course there was even ways for resources already in place by the time the eruption did happen.
Okay, just to clarify, Paolo, no, the task force Kanlaon that was created by the president, this is the interagency task force, no?
Yes, po.
But the OCD already, through the Secretary of National Defense, created a task force Kanlaon within OCD that is chaired by Director Raul Fernandez. Now, in terms of the actions done, no, for the OCD task force Kanlaon, again, you're correct, no? All preemptive measures really benefited us, no? The fact that we asked our citizens to stay in the evacuation centers, I guess the results would be, and we're still hoping that this will be confirmed, no? We have zero casualty with the recent eruption. So I think the preemptive measures are really effective. Now, as to the task force Kanlaon created by the president, this looks to the long term as to what solutions can be done, because his comment is that it's very clear, no? This cannot happen every single time Mount Kanlaon will erupt. So Task Force Kanlaon, as created by the president, will now look towards long-term solutions, location of areas outside the permanent danger zones, relocation of our citizens who are living within the permanent danger zone of 4 kilometers. And this will go hand in hand. We have both short-term and long-term solutions in the pipeline.
You mentioned po long-term effects, and that actually leads me to my next question. Of course, environmentally, there will be consequences from the eruption, especially when it comes to yung agriculture sector po natin, of course, the local ecosystems. Are there any steps already being taken to mitigate any of the adverse effects, especially sa agriculture po natin?
That's correct. No? Close to 130 million already is in terms of damage to agriculture has been recorded. Now, as to solutions, we are coordinating with our Department of Agriculture what can be done for our farmers to help them recover from this disaster. No? Now, as you also correctly pointed out, there are environmental impacts. Of course, ashfall will affect the ability of plants for photosynthesis, and of course, our crops. No, so we are closely monitoring, and again, one of the functions of the task force Kanlaon, as created by the president, is to identify areas that will be safe for purposes of planting, for purposes of these farming activities. No, so there are programs in place, and I think the Department of Agriculture will also release seedlings for our farmers so that they can again slowly recover from this disaster.
You mentioned a while ago that a lot of preemptive measures were already taken, considering na medyo expected po that Mount Kanlaon would be active, and it turned out to be true, especially with the recent eruption. Does this mean that those in the evacuation centers are actually closer to actually returning to their homes, or are they going to be kept there still as a precautionary measure for the foreseeable future?
Okay, first, I think we've discussed this before, no? That there's no exact science to predict
Yes.
eruptions of volcanoes. But based on the recent data from PHIVOLCS, they are considering this still as a minor eruption, and the possibility of a major eruption is still there. No? So, in terms of the decision whether or not to allow our citizens to return to their homes, I think we'll have to rely on PHIVOLCS for that.
Considering that we do have to rely on FIVOC's decision, and of course, at the moment, it doesn't seem like babalik po sila based on the recent data. How are the resources of the OCD and, of course, the other resources coming in to be able to handle a more protracted stay, especially right now na there's probably added stress on yung resources, especially after the recent eruption?
That's very true, no? But I think the message of the president is very clear. He compared the services with respect to disaster response to that of a conveyor belt. So the impression is that you just have to keep on going, providing services just continuously. With the recent passage of the guidelines for the Quick Response Fund, I think that will really help for us to be able to procure additional items to support this protracted stay of our citizens in the evacuation centers. The DSWD, they're just really like a working factory, day in, day out. They just produce food packs. And like what I said, they are ready to deploy 200,000 food packs at any given time at any location in the Philippines. Our strengthening of our disaster risk reduction management plans from the local to the barangay levels is there. So we are ready to respond to this disaster. It's just really um, asking for patience for our citizens. I know that it's very difficult for you to stay in the evacuation center, but we really cannot afford to risk your safety just for the sake of you returning to your houses. So kapit lang po, no? Just a little more patience. Hopefully, this will really pass.
Sir Chris, for those wondering, especially those in the area, how can they stay updated po with regard to all of the announcements and, of course, all the progress made by the OCD?
Yes, we suggest to attentively listen to announcements from your LGUs because the coordination is there from the national government all the way to your LGUs. If you want to have additional information, you may visit the website of OCD, the NDRMC, and I think the more important website to visit is the one of FIVOLX, no? For you to be able to be updated of situational reports, especially with respect to volcanic eruptions.
He is a Deputy Chief of Staff and spokesperson for the Office of Civil Defense, Chris Bendijo. Maraming salamat po. Thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Thank you. Good morning.